Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a new series. The new series is, yes, there are modern recordings of the classics as great as anything that's happened in the past. And we're going to talk about some of them. And I want to do this particularly because, hello, Finster. There's Finster. Because some of you have said or claimed that I don't review enough new recordings and that I am too nostalgic for the great recordings of the past. Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. And I think about that. I take that very seriously. I really do. I don't think it's a legitimate criticism, but I do take it very seriously. I'm aware of the possibility. But we need to clarify a few misconceptions before we begin, and then we're going to start looking at fabulous new recordings that are as good as anything that has ever been done, and that were, relatively recent, so that we can dispel this notion that all of us old farts here, record collectors, are just sunk in navel gazing about our childhoods. I mean, we're not doing that at all. That's not true. There are a lot of reasons why that impression, however, may come across. And one of the reasons is that if you really know the discography for a work, I mean, if you've been listening to it for 40 or 50 years, as I have, and collecting records for that length of time, you're going to be talking about a lot of older recordings. That's just the nature of the beast, number one. Number two, it is absolutely true that there was a golden age in the 50s and 60s. There just was. There were amazing record producers, the Walter Leggs and Max Wilcox and Chuck Pfeiffer and Louis Layton and we know who they were. I mean, they were amazing. John Culshaw and did I say Walter Legg? I don't know. There were just a bunch of them. They made great records. They knew how to make great records. They knew how to choose the artists so that. And they were great artists. There was just a slew of fabulous artists to choose from, and they knew what repertoire to do, and they knew how to record it. And it was a wonderful time. It was, stereo was new, audio was a thing, and these people made recordings with the philosophy that a recording was not supposed to be like what we have now, which is like set up the microphones and hope for the best. In other words, try and recreate the natural sound of a live performance. No, they weren't doing that. They were creating a product for home listening. And that's a very, very different attitude. And so the performances that they recorded and that they released had an amazing but different sonic kind of ambience from what you would hear live. And that's great because you can't reproduce the sound of a concert hall in your living room. Nobody can. And they weren't trying to do it. They were trying to make the best possible, clearest, most vivid recording of the work at hand so that you could enjoy it at home. And that was a wonderful time for recordings. And so a lot of the best recordings were made then. And sonically, they still sound better than, as often as not half the stuff that comes out today. However, that is no excuse. We have to evaluate every single recording on its own merits. And that's what I try to do. Nonetheless, some of you have claimed that, in like the repertoire videos, there are too many old recordings and not enough new recordings. I don't know how many new ones would be enough. The idea in those recordings is to simply sort out the best things and give you a sense of what they are. And so, but again, like I said, I'm sensitive to that type of criticism. And I want to explain to people who are new to this business, people who are new to the works and to the discographies of the works, that some of these things have hundreds of recordings, and a lot of them are fabulous. And some of the newer ones, well, sometimes things go out of style, things come into style. Right now, for example, the whole classical repertoire has been taken over by period instrument people, the authenticity movement, and a lot of people come to know those works solely on that basis. And so they're very out of sympathy with the aesthetic of earlier recordings, which may be wonderful, but they haven't quite figured out how they could be wonderful because they don't sound like what they expect them to sound. Well, that all comes with experience. It really does. And the better you know the work, the more you'll be open to different interpretive approaches. But with all that said, I agree that quite often there are very new recordings of these works that are just as fabulous as anything that we have ever seen before. And I think it's important to point them out. I want to highlight them because, first of all, it gives us hope. It tells us that there is still musical genius floating around and fabulous work being done, and there is all over the place. There is. The problem today is that there's too much of it. You can't sort through it. It's impossible to make sense of it when there are hundreds of recordings of everything, and you can download and you can stream and you can get physical product, or they may be on YouTube, things like that. A lot of people experience these works solely through digital media and things like YouTube, actually. And so they're not aware of all of the other, historically great performances. So I want to do both. I want you to know what the great stuff from the past was, but also the best of the new. And I'm trying to do that. I can only tell you, will I be totally successful or satisfy everybody? No, but I try. So we're going to start. We're going to start with one of the iconic works, Beethoven's Eroica, a symphony for which we all know that the reference recording is George Sell with the Cleveland Orchestra, one of them anyway, and maybe Otto Klemperer with the Philharmonia. There's some other really wonderful Eroicas that were part of the historical pantheon of great recordings. However, there are also newer ones, and one of them, is as great as anything that has ever been done in the Eroica, I have no hesitation to say that, is this one, Manfred Honeck with the Pittsburgh Symphony on reference recordings. It's coupled with the Strauss First Horn Concerto, which is kind of fun. This is a performance that does everything you want the Eroica to do. It is punchy. It is accented. It is revolutionary. It's driving. The funeral march is devastating, but also flowing. It's a little bit shorter than the first movement. Sometimes it's longer. God, it's really powerful. The scherzo has lightness and delicacy. The horn playing in the trio is astounding. They have the greatest horn section in the universe, by the way. And the finale, which can be difficult because it's a theme and variations with like contrapuntal episodes and a coda that can kind of go flat. It doesn't. It makes a magnificent capstone for the entire performance, and it's stunningly well recorded by Reference Recordings, an audiophile label that does superb work. It's all evidence of total greatness, and I'm happy to say so. Now, there will, of course, always be controversy. There will be people who listen to it and hate it. There will be people who only want to hear the Eroica played on period instruments and things like that. And there's no accounting for people's individual tastes. But there are standards. There are standards of quality in playing, standards of quality in interpretation, standards of quality in engineering, and those are a lot more objective than people give them credit for being. It really depends on how you approach something as a listener. There are some people who listen and simply say, well, I just want what pleases me, and everything else sucks. As long as I'm happy, the rest of the universe can go to hell, and I hate everything else. There are some people who imprint on their first version of it, and nothing after that could ever be as good. I think, and my perspective and what I'm trying to inculcate here, is the idea that you need to keep your ears open to a myriad of different interpretations. You need to be able to listen to different schools of interpretation, different approaches. You may love the Eroica played on authentic instruments. Some performances were wonderful. One of the best and oldest was Collegium Aurum under Franz Joseph Mayer, one of the first original instrument Beethoven performances. They did the Eroica. It was beautiful. It was a lovely performance. There's some other things like that. Then there are all the heavy-duty period instrument people, the Harnoncourts, the Gardners, all those people, and you may love one of their performances. But there is a standard. The standard of technical excellence in execution and interpretive understanding of the work. And that latter quality which some people would say is totally subjective, isn't really when you know the work really well and you begin to get a sense of what it offers the interpreter. And then you start thinking, you have your list of boxes to check. Do they nail this part? Do they get that right? Are the tempos correct here? Are the balances right there? You begin to get a sense of it, and you should be able to recognize a great performance even if you're not in sympathy with the approach. That's what's really, I think, the important thing, because this is a great performance, an unabashedly great performance. I mean, the guy has thought out his interpretation. He's conveyed it to the orchestra. The orchestra is world class. They play like their lives depended on it, and they're gorgeously recorded. If you don't like the approach, well, that's on you. But you have to acknowledge quality wherever you find it. I don't particularly care for escargot, but I know that they're a delicacy and that there are places that make them and present them superbly. And I am more than welcome to try them, and whether I like them or not, to credit the artistry that went into their cooking. It's the same thing like anything else. So I want to approach this whole endeavor with that in mind. We're going to get as many new recordings as I can find that are recent, recent meaning in the past decade or two, because that's what recent is. And it doesn't have to be like last week. You can't be irrational in your idea of what new is. And we're going to talk about them a little bit, as we just have. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll accompany me on this journey, particularly if you're new, particularly if you're just coming to the classics, or if you're an old stick in the mud who needs a little shaking up here and there. That could be helpful too. Take care.